Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I actually know it all or not. We will see. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you ask questions in the comments or email me questions, and my wife will ferret them out, and we'll find out whether I know the answer or not. So, without further ado, here is today's question. Drum roll. All right. Rocketry question again. What was the first rocket that was ever reflown in orbit? All right. That's actually, kind of fun and relevant to today because, of course, SpaceX is launching and landing Falcon 9s, and they are, fingers crossed, within about 12 months from this recording should be launching and landing Starships and so forth. But they are definitely not the first. I will go with... I'm almost positive it was a space shuttle. So that would have been the early 1980s. And, oh gosh, oh, if I had to name which of the ones it was, I believe it was the Challenger, which sadly, of course, was destroyed during launch in 1986, day before my birthday, actually, weirdly enough. It's a very memorable experience. I remember skiing at Killington, Vermont, and the temperature, I believe, was like negative 40 degrees on the summit, and I went on a ski run, and of course you can only do like one or two, and then you have to go in because you're going to get frostbite. And I came inside, and people were talking about the fact that the space shuttle blew up. And, at this point, since the Apollo 1 disaster, there had not been any major space disasters, at least that we knew of, right? I think there were some in the Soviet Union. But anyway, it was a really huge, massive hit to our, I guess, American, but also just, the idea that space was like relatively quote unquote safe and everything. But yeah, anyway, I remember that. So I will go ahead and check on that right now, and then we'll talk about it just a little bit more in a second. Just a minute. Okie dokie. Well, I was wrong on both counts. Number one, it was the Columbia that was launched first, not the Challenger. Unfortunately, both of them seem to have bad luck on those two. And then on the second end of things, I totally forgot about the X-15 space plane. It says, I think it said what was the first one that was flown to orbit. So in that case, it definitely was the space shuttle. But if we're talking about just going into space, then the X-15 was definitely the first one. So, boy, I don't know whether to give myself credit for that one or not. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. So I guess... I don't know. I can't give myself credit all the time, so I'm gonna have to give myself a boo on that one. So yeah, okay. So just at least if I'd gotten the Columbia correct, I probably would have given myself credit, but I didn't do that. So anyway, yeah, the X-15, what a fantastic, fascinating plane. If you've seen The Right Stuff, you will have seen people flying that one. That was a pretty amazing spacecraft, and it was, I believe, it still holds the record for the fastest, like in atmosphere, plane type thing flying anyway. But yeah, the space shuttle also, that was of course reusable. The lander section was like a big old brick of an airplane, and it would fly down and it would land on the runway. And, reusable is kind of iffy because it was actually more or less refurbishable. It took them months and months and months and millions of dollars. It had amazing engines on it. It was unfortunately a very unsafe spacecraft, because of the fact that it was just mostly because of the configuration. Number one, because it had solid rocket boosters, but to some extent that wasn't the ultimate reason why it was super dangerous. The big reason why was because it's very, very large, and it was mounted next to, I'll put a graphic up, of course, but it was mounted next to the solid rocket motors and to the external fuel tank. And that fuel tank, of course, was the only part that wasn't reused out of the whole thing. But the problem was that fuel tank had cryogenic fuel in it, and it had a bunch of very cold ice that would form on it as it would sit out there. And as it went up, that ice could fall off, and that's ultimately what did the Columbia in the crash in the early 2000s. Very sad. The other part of it was, of course, that it did not have an escape system, which is a little bit ridiculous. They just couldn't quite figure out how to do it. Honestly, if they'd put some parachutes on the because the crew capsule is very, very, very strong. It's like, I think it was titanium or something. It was made out of a very strong material, and it, according to all evidence, the people inside the Challenger actually survived the explosion and then tumbled out of the sky and landed in the ocean. So honestly, if they'd had even parachutes on that thing, something minor, they could have maybe survived that accident. But certainly, all aircraft now are being constructed in a different manner. I would say that the SpaceX Starship is going to be the next most dangerous craft to fly. Elon Musk and Glenn Shotwell keep saying that they've got something worked out where it has an escape system. But the escape system essentially means that the upper stage at least has to go off. Now, the advantage it has is that it's on the super heavy, so you've got the lower stage and the upper stage, and the most dangerous part of the flight is when the lower stage is taking off, and it's going through the first, minute 90 seconds ish of the flight. And during that part, if something goes wrong with the lower stage, assuming that they can spin up the engines fast enough, the turbo pumps on the upper stage engines fast enough to take off, they could actually escape in the upper stage and then use that to glide back down again. So the configuration is much, much safer than the configuration of the space shuttle, which was essentially putting everything kind of together sideways, and there was no real chance of escape or anything happening at that point. So that was an extremely dangerous ship. But anyway, so, oh well, messed up that time. Kind of sort of knew what the answer was, but not quite good enough. Anyway, make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you ask questions in the comments or email me at DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com, and I will be happy to continue to try to answer your questions, and we will see how I do. Until next time, bye-bye.